Yeah, hi. Hi, good afternoon. I think that what I wanted to say today, everybody has said already. So I'm going to run some presentation, but I'm going to talk slightly different from what the slides are going to say. So please pardon me on that because the idea is to add some new perspective rather than sort of repeat what people have said in the morning. So approach to net zero, and we know why we all want to do it. So I'm going to jump into one of the key areas that we talk about. A lot has already been talked about on stage three, which is the operational carbon. And I think since morning they've been talking about how do we minimize energy use, how do we reduce operational carbon in buildings, and how do we go to net zero. And I understand that also there's been discussion about embodied carbon in terms of how do we minimize the embodied carbon of all the materials that go into our buildings. So I'm going to actually only talk about stage two, which is construction carbon. Putting up the project itself emits carbon. One is the materials and where they come from and the embodied carbon associated with it. But there's also the actual construction process. I mean, let's face it, the greenest way is to not build at all. But having said that, we all want to build because development needs to happen, and there is a lot that needs to happen in India in terms of the next 20, 25 years as we move towards a developed nation. So there's going to be a lot of construction activity. So how do we construct with minimum impact on the environment, with minimum carbon emissions during that 2, 3, 5 year construction period when activities happen on site? And that's what I'm going to talk about. So there are different aspects that you do. So one is the measurement of the entire carbon emissions during the construction process. Day zero, when you start your excavation work, till the end when your building is complete and you're handing over, there's always some activity that's happening on site. And again, that can be bucketed into scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions depending on what activities are being performed by the civil contractors on site, by the excavation contractors, then by your MEP contractors, and so many of the workers that are actually going to be involved in putting up that construction project for a 2, 3, and 5 year period. And we are going to talk about it. So if you look at the emissions, you can also bucket all our site emissions into scope 1, 2, and 3. Scope 1 actually starts with all the fuel consumption of all the construction equipment on site, be it your JCBs, be it your excavators, be it all your equipment where you're going to do construction process, typically runs on diesel. They are the most inefficient and they are also the most carbon intensive. And all of that fuel consumption becomes a scope 1 emission during the construction process. Even the labor colonies, let's say you have laborers on site and you have a labor shed and you are actually cooking food for 2,000 people, the LPG gas consumption for making those chapatis for the next 3 years also gets accounted as scope 1 emissions. So when you start tracking gas consumption on site, you're looking at every activity that's happened on site and what is the equivalent of amount of gas that gets consumed, so you know what my scope 1 emissions look like. Also, all the site visits that happen, from the company, from the consultant teams, from the project teams, all their vehicles coming to site and going back. Let's say I'm visiting the site every week for the next 2 years. Even my travel from the vehicles that either the company picks up and drops me, then it becomes scope 1. If I'm flying and coming, it becomes scope 3. But essentially, even the entire project team and the activities and the visits by them gets accounted as carbon emissions throughout the construction project. So the takeaway from that is call us less to do site visits. So the carbon emissions will come down. But secondly, the scope 2. This is all the electricity consumption during the entire construction process. Today, many construction sites have already started metering the energy consumption during the construction process for all the construction activities. And of course, scope 3, which is the bigger piece, which is the embodied carbon, comes as scope 3 when we talk of construction carbon emissions. And then what we try to do is we look at the top 20 materials that are carbon intensive when you start doing embodied carbon calculations. I don't know if somebody spoke about embodied carbon earlier this morning, I wasn't here, but essentially there are hundreds of materials that go into our building. But if you look at, there will probably be 15-20 materials that will make up for 80% of the carbon emissions of the project. So to start with, to complicate less and at least to bring in a mechanism of thinking and tracking, we start looking at the top 20 materials so we can track the embodied emissions. Of course, waste generation throughout the construction process, transportation, vehicle fuel, all of this gets counted. The framework that typically gets used is the ISO 14064 framework. Again, that is a broad GHG framework for tracking and reporting carbon emissions. Whether it is operational emissions or construction emissions, it's the same standard. It's just that it's tracked and reported slightly differently. And the idea is you start with tracking it, but unlike our operational carbon where you can track, report, and then you set a target for reduction, in construction, it doesn't work that way. Then you can only set the target for your next project. You can't do it in this project because you'll be tracking it till the project gets completed. So there are some guidelines and there are some metrics which we can use to say, okay, if I were to construct this project, a 1 million square feet of a commercial office space will typically take, let's say, a 2.5 year construction time period. This will be the approximate emissions, and then you set a target of saying, maybe I want to reduce 10%, 15%, 20% from that, and you work your way towards how do I get there. Even in that, the embodied carbon becomes a very big component. In fact, that is the biggest component, and that is also the biggest challenge today in the country. As much as we tell everybody that we should do LC analysis and we should do embodied carbon calculations, what do you do after that? I myself, we have done hundreds of LC analysis and I generate and give a report. The next question as a client we typically get asked from the client is, how do we reduce it? So next you go back to say there are two ways to reduce it. You start looking at low carbon materials so that we can reduce our embodied carbon. The next question is, okay, where are these low carbon materials available? And are they available commonly and can we procure them? And again, we are in that sort of crux in India today where we want to do certain things, but the manufacturing industry hasn't yet gotten there. But there's another piece, a more important piece in embodied carbon, which has got to do with design. And I'm going to piggyback on what Selva was talking in the previous session. Optimization of design is very, very critical from an embodied carbon standpoint also. Standardization of design. I'll give a simple example. So if you talk about glass, and glass is a high carbon intensive material. Saint-Gobain actually makes glass only in 2 or 3 standard sizes, and they only make single glass in their factories globally. So when we design buildings and when we look at facade designs, we get designs of all heights, 2.4 meters, 2.45, 2.7, 2.9, 3.1. Many times what we don't realize is that when you go for a non-standard facade size, the amount of material wastage that Saint-Gobain has to generate to supply that glass to you is huge. And it's not just the cost that's coming to you, the associated carbon is also coming to you. So when we look at embodied carbon, there's always that topic is like, okay, I have my BOQ. Now I want to procure low carbon material. Is there a supplier who can give low carbon cement or low carbon glass? Is somebody having some materials? Can I procure? That is always the thought process. But what we're not thinking is our design even low carbon? Can we go back to see, can we standardize materials? Can we look at modular structures? Can we look at certain standard sizes that are available with manufacturers and see how that can be fitted in our buildings so that we can minimize carbon emissions? So when we start looking at construction techniques, and I'll talk about it when we talk about modularity, one of the biggest movements forward in the construction industry is going to be modular design and construction. In the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to see a lot of building materials and technologies come similar to your prefabricated systems where you're going to get them in standard sizes. They can be installed, they can be dismantled, they can be repurposed, they can be relocated. So essentially, you're minimizing waste, you're minimizing carbon, and you're standardizing methods and technologies in a way that you can actually achieve a lower carbon emission overall for the building and for the project. So essentially, embodied carbon goes back to optimized design. So start looking at, can I go for standard sizes? Do I need it? Look at every material. One of the biggest mantras for decarbonization is dematerialization. The first question we have to ask is that material even required? Can I do without it? If I were to do without it, what is the impact does it have? If I have to have it, what is the impact that it has? Another classic example, since we're still talking on glass, is on the projections and fins in buildings. Many times we see a lot of buildings having horizontal fins, vertical fins, a lot of aesthetic elements. Some of them are also performance elements, sometimes they're purely aesthetic elements. Many of these come from aluminium. Again, aluminium is a high carbon material. And if you start looking at embodied carbon, that's a very big number. So, can we look at, the first question we have to ask is, do we need it? If we need it, do we need it everywhere? Can we go only provide it in areas where it is actually going to improve the, cut the heat coming into the building? So a lot of things have to go into design to talk about optimizing design both from a construction and an embodied carbon perspective. So when we start a process, like any process, the first step will be awareness. Once you have a contractor on board, the first step is to work with them, to tell them that this is something we want to track. Next 2 years, sit with an L&T or an equivalent and say, next 2 years, we want to track the entire construction carbon emissions associated with everything you will do at site. So we do a class awareness with them to make sure that they first understand why we are doing what we are doing. It need not change the way they are doing anything to start with, but at least they should be aware, and you have to educate them. Then you start talking about establishing boundaries. As a construction site, there is a boundary, but there is also another virtual boundary within each project. We do certain things, we inherit certain things, and we don't do certain things. So we draw what is called as a virtual carbon boundary. Certain things, for example, if you're doing an interior fit out project, the builder, base build, would have already done some of those things. So that's not part of your boundary. Your emission boundary will be limited to activities that you have control. Essentially, the boundary is drawn by the logic of, what do I have control over? Because unless I have control, I can't reduce. And then you start collecting data. You set up a mechanism on site to draw and calculate, not even calculate, to just capture all the data. How many JCBs there are, what is the frequency of usage, what is the fuel being used, are there tankers of diesel coming in, how much is coming in, how much is stored, how much is consumed. Electricity, you start tracking your meter readings monthly, get your meter logs, so you know how much electricity has gone into doing that month of construction activity on site. Vehicle movement, so basically you start making a checklist to track every activity at site. Basically, this is done through the contractor because none of us will be there full time at site. We generally ask the contractor to nominate one person who will be sort of the green champion on site, and he or she is given checklists to start filling and tracking all of these things. And then you start to quantify them, and then you compile the total GHG calculations. You can subsequently validate it and publish it. But more importantly, what you need to do is to identify what are your sources of emission. Initially, when the construction activity starts at site, sit down and identify what are all the activities that are done on site. There will be activities that are done off site, and maybe panels that are brought and assembled at site. So basically, you will have to identify each and every activity and identify each and every source that will add to the carbon emissions at site. And then from there, as a next step, you look at what can you do to reduce this. And I'll talk in a bit about what can we do at project sites to minimize this carbon emission. And of course, you can track and report, you can publish it. People today even buy carbon offsets to offset the construction carbon that has been generated, and it starts at the site day zero and it ends only at the time when the project is complete, and you look at all of these aspects. So just to give you a simple chart, and I leave this with the team here, each activity, what is my scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, you start mapping this on site. So if I'm doing demolition work, let's say there is an existing building on site and I'm going to actually bring it down. So for that, what are my activities, of which what will fall under scope 1, scope 2, scope 3? Similarly with concrete work, steel work, site steel framing, block work, roofing. Basically, at every stage, you're trying to map each activity. They could be different set of contractors. Maybe there is a single general contractor. Our country, the contracts work in many ways, but basically we start trying to do this, classify scope 1, 2, and 3 throughout the construction process, all the way till final cleaning, and look at it. I'm just going to talk about one project that we did this many years back, actually almost 7, 8 years back. This is a hotel resort in Dehradun. And what they did is they actually are building in a very eco-sensitive zone in Dehradun, and they wanted to make sure that the resort that they put up has minimum impact overall to the environment. And even that minimum impact they wanted to track, and they wanted to offset, to say that whatever we did through this construction, we have found a way to actually replenish it or give it back. And then you start looking at, these were some of theirs. They had international architects and international consultants, so we started tracking from their air travel to domestic travel to train travel, all the modes of transport, of course, all the diesel consumptions by the site vehicles, contractor vehicles, owner vehicles, kerosene consumption, LPG, electricity. They were also using steam for hot water, because in winters when construction happens, they had to provide heating for the labor areas as well as for hot water for showers and so forth. So there was a small boiler, and that was generating hot water which was pumped to the labor sheds for maintaining heat and hot water. So all of this was tracked throughout the 2.5, 3 year period, and each of this was then quantified into what those components are. And if you look at the larger components, you will see that the construction vehicles, JCB, the DG sets, the owner sets, so electricity and your construction components become a very, very big component of your overall carbon emissions. And of course, travel and other things also come into the picture. But essentially, we tracked each and everything. Energy is always the biggest, scope 2 is always the biggest number in a construction site. And there are ways now, we're seeing a lot of people put up temporary solar structures and solar plants during the construction process. So some of this can move from fossil fuel to renewable power. In some cases, the labor sheds are, powered by solar power. You have the, office, the project office, the site office is powered by that. So there are ways that you can try and break that down, but that's still a very big component. And of course, scope 3 is also a very big component, especially when you start looking at raw materials and transportation of raw materials and where they come from and the things associated with it. So essentially, when you start looking at every aspect of site activity, you'll realize three things. One, you'll understand what are all the big items that are the ones that contribute to the maximum carbon emissions during the construction period. And then we can identify ways to see how we can minimize it. Water is something we've also started adding. We did not do it in this project, but we're starting to do it. And water is another component which gets translated into scope 3, similar to waste, because it's very important to see how much, especially if you're using fresh water or raw water for construction, and already there are zones where water is very limited. So it becomes very critical to look at how we construct and look at technologies, for example, prefabricated systems, pre-engineered systems, modular systems, things that can be done at the factory and shipped to site, so you can minimize a lot of the site-related carbon emissions, because then you are actually doing it in a more controlled environment and probably with a lot less carbon. And eventually, when manufacturers themselves move to renewable energy, maybe some of those are being done at factories with solar power. So naturally, the carbon emissions that comes to the project becomes a lot less and a lot more limited. So essentially, every aspect becomes critical. And eventually you can get a summary of what your direct emissions are, what your indirect emissions and your other indirect emissions are. And today there are ways that people are adopting, forests nearby, where they can actually use some of those for offsetting the carbon emissions associated with the construction process. Some of them are sponsoring renewable energy projects. Some of them are doing the same renewable energy project on site. If you're going to put a solar panel, let's say of 300 kilowatt or 500 kilowatt, 2 years when the project is nearing completion, why not put that today and use that solar power for constructing the project also? It's anyway going to be a cost. It's anyway something that you've factored in your budget. You probably have also, decided to procure it. Usually that's the last item that gets procured after the building itself is completed, and then they start installing the solar. Why not be the first item so that it can start generating and you can start using that power to minimize a lot of the energy indirect emissions during the construction process, power the labor sheds, power, if you have more, put it back in the grid at that point in time, and eventually when you start operations you'll probably consume all of it yourself. So some of these thought processes can come up where it will actually help us to be more mindful of how we are constructing the project itself. So I just wanted to give a very different perspective, because I know we talk about zero carbon, and today the construction carbon is still a smaller percentage in comparison to operational carbon or even embodied carbon. But at the rate at which India is developing, we're going to have a lot more new construction than existing assets. So in the next 20 years, when more and more construction happens, this construction carbon number is only going to grow. And if we can become more mindful of how we are going to design, construct, and educate contractors and their labor teams in order to become more critical and mindful about this, it can go a long way. I think I'm out of time too. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.